Hi, what's the connection between Christianity and Halloween? That is the question I want to look at today. To understand this question, we need to take a step back to history. When we look at the early Christian era, Rome was persecuting Christians, and there were a number of Christians that died as martyrs, sometimes in the arenas, other times serving people where there was plague. They did that as a way of modeling Christ's self-giving love. Eventually, Rome became Christian because of the work that was done by these people that were martyrs, and they were seen as saints of the faith. During the medieval times, the life of the saints were often celebrated, and they had different days of a feast for the life of the saints. In the 8th century, Pope Gregory IV said, instead of different people having different feasts, let's have an All Saints feast on November the 1st. This is also the Feast of the Hallows, because hallows comes from the word holy or sacred. So the All Saints feast was also called this Feast of the Hallows. So that was November the 1st, which meant October the 31st was the evening of the Feast of the Hallows. So that was a day in which people would have vigils as a way of ushering in the Feast of the Saints. So October 31st became Hallows Eve or Halloween, right? So that's how the tradition of Halloween ultimately started. So somebody may ask, where did the costumes come from? How did the tradition of wearing costumes on Halloween come about? To look at this, we need to understand what happened in the medieval times. In the medieval times, when they had the Feast of the Saints or the Feast of the Hallows, people would often dress up as the saints as a way of living into and modeling the life of the saint. So that is a space where the idea of wearing costumes during the Feast of the Hallows or Halloween came about. And in modernity, we don't often wear costumes for that purpose of modeling the life of the saints. Rather, we wear costumes of superheroes like Batman or Superman. And the interesting part is the idea of the superhero is ultimately modern tradition of the idea of the saint. So a saint back in the day was seen as a superhero because a saint would go into the wilderness and pray to God and have supernatural strength and come back into the city to perform miracles and live a supernatural life. So the saints were the people that were originally seen as the superheroes. Even today in our Halloween, we wear costumes of different superheroes, oftentimes not realizing perhaps that this is something that comes from the tradition of the medieval church, looking back into the ancient saints who lived Christ-like lives for the sake of peace in the world. And then there was another perspective that Halloween brought for people in the medieval times, which is the idea of the memento mori. Memento mori is the idea of remembrance of our death. When we look at different medieval paintings, oftentimes there are paintings that have a skull in it. The idea was that having a skull was a remembrance that we are people that will ultimately one day die. And the idea of that we are mortal people, that one day we will die, was there to help us reorient the priorities of our lives. Instead of allowing ourselves to be bothered about all petty issues, the remembrance that one day we will die adds a sense of urgency to our life that helps us to have the right priorities. For example, somebody could be bothered that at their work they didn't get a promotion. It may seem like a big thing, but at the end of the day, what really matters is, do your children love you? That is a bigger priority than whether you got this promotion at this job or not. Because ultimately, the people at work are not going to be with you when you die. It is your children or your family is the one that is going to be around you when you ultimately pass away. So that is another way that the medieval people looked at this idea of remembrance of mortality to help them to have the right priorities. that relationships and love perhaps matter more than job or money. And this idea of using our mortality as a way of finding the priorities for our life is not just a medieval idea. It happens in modernity. For example, in the book The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Stephen R. Covey says the first rule is to begin with the end in mind. He says, think about what people would tell about you in your eulogy. Then work your way backwards to figure out how you can live that kind of life. This book sold 40 million copies, right? So even in modernity, we have this idea of using the remembrance of death to frame our own sense of what is the priority of this life. A theologian called Catherine Doherty says, "For truly, man has been born to become a saint, a lover of love who died for us. There is but one tragedy, which is not to be a saint." She says, for every human being, the ultimate goal is to be the lover of love who died for us, which is our love for God. And she says the one tragedy is to not become a saint. That is the ultimate goal. And that should be the one that ultimately prioritizes everything in our lives. So, one way of looking at Halloween from this Christian tradition is to look at Halloween as a remembrance of the people that were saints that went before us, and also to use it as an opportunity to think about how we can prioritize our lives in such a way that our lives too become saintly in that sense. So that is all I have for today, and if there is anything that you want me to talk about, or if there's any question that you want me to address in the next video, please put that in the comments below. If you like this, if you subscribe to my channel, you'll get the next video that I post here. So until I see you in another video, bye for now.